So hello and welcome. My name is James Rice from Mohawk Valley Community College, and today I'm joined by John Sands from Moraine Valley Community College, Ernie Friend from Florida State College at Jacksonville, Kyle Jones at Sinclair Community College. Welcome, guys. And today we're looking to kind of give a little bit more of a preview to the topic of offering bachelor's degrees from community college and kind of some of the national trends that exist in that arena. So I would just wanted to say that when I very first saw this topic, I was really interested coming from a community college, being faculty at one that teaches, where I certainly notice as the cybersecurity club advisor how within 2 years my students are leaving me. And it's like, wow, wouldn't it be great if they would just stay a little bit longer? How do we make that happen? It's like, okay, well, obviously a bachelor's degree would certainly keep them there a little bit more. So I found the topic really interesting. But kind of beyond that, what immediately came to mind was, all right, I know based on different states and based on different places, you know, the education process isn't always up to me or isn't always up to my college. So I thought maybe we might get the discussion started by talking a little bit about what you might have discovered is some of the patterns across the states, or how much does the state play a role, and what would it take for someone like me who's really interested in interacting with these students a little bit longer as they develop and try to see what would it take for them to keep their education going where I am. So maybe Kyle, I'll pass that to you first.
Yeah, thanks, James. Yeah, it is interesting. When Ernie and I first started looking into this, there were some things that we discovered that was kind of a shock to me. I didn't realize that a lot of this community colleges offering baccalaureate degrees actually started in the late 80s, all the way up until 2018, 2019. Sinclair in Dayton, Ohio just now is letting students get baccalaureate degrees at Ohio schools. So that was kind of a shock to me. And right now, there's about 136 institutions in 28 states allowing community colleges to offer those degree programs. So just seeing that there's a history of this and seeing how that flows, it is a lot the states that are allowing the community colleges to offer this. And there's a lot to be said with that, because even the community colleges might even have to maybe even change a focus, or maybe even what their mission statement is to offer a baccalaureate degree. So it's something to think about.
Yeah, that's a good point, Kyle. And certainly in our research, a few things came up. Certainly I think one of the biggest drivers is politics. Certainly universities are well embedded at the bachelor level in most states. So how does a state go from, how does a school go from being a community college to offering 4-year degrees? It really depends on each state, as the research that we came up with. I know here in Florida, it happened, oh gosh, probably 20 plus years now ago, and there was one community college that wanted to offer, I think it started off as a nursing degree, St. P College. So they worked with the state to be the first community college to offer a 4-year degree, and they became a state college after that. Because they sort of blazed the trail, it made it a little bit easier for the rest of us. But even still, I think, that's for the politics, even if your community college is allowed to create 4-year degrees, or you're pursuing it, one of the things you really have to do is partner or work with the local university, because they certainly own, in a lot of places, they own the bachelor space, the 4-year space. So you need to work with them and kind of smooth out any politics. But it seems like a lot of this is happening at the state level. So with we've got Florida is, I think, very centralized when it comes to education. So a lot of our content is centrally located at the state level. For instance, if we want to offer a new degree or a new program, it's got to be sent to the state. Some states are very regional. So, depending on the state you're in, you may be able to offer a 4-year degree just by working with your local county or region. But certainly it's a big movement, like Kyle had mentioned. It's heading in the direction of most states eventually, I think, probably offering letting community colleges offer 4-year degrees. So Yeah, we'll talk more in the next couple of minutes about how that might work, but certainly there's a long history of it, longer than most people think, and there's lots of advantages for a community college to offer bachelor degrees, which we'll touch on in a couple of minutes.
All right,
Thanks,
so
guys. That's really interesting to hear that at least there's a precedent that that there's hope for me that it might happen in my area. So, John, what do you think of the topic?
yes, I'd like to ask you another question because Illinois is one of those states that I don't really see this happening. And part of it is, the impact it would have on the entire ecosystem of the higher education in the state itself. So my question is, what impact has it? I understand that these are a little bit different in being, Bachelor of Applied Science, but I know it's got to wrinkle, the leads of the both private colleges and public colleges in your area. But has it affected your articulation? Does articulation maybe work better, especially at the graduate level? And this is, I understand that it's normally workforce driven. So how has that have your students found a niche that finishes 4-year degrees? And is there a niche in the workforce? And really, is there a need for these applied sciences degrees in the baccalaureate level?
Yeah. So at Sinclair and with the other schools that we talked to, John, they kind of had that singular focus maybe on, take for instance, at Sinclair, it's a lot of aviation. We have one of the largest drone unmanned aerial system schools. So a lot of our baccalaureate programs are centered around some sort of technology or AI for aviation. That's not necessarily something that, we have in this area. It was an impact to the other colleges. And again, it was political. We actually had to go testify at the state house in order to get these passed. And as you can imagine, our local universities also sent people to testify with us or against us or for us at different events. So it did create a little bit of an impact, but students can then transfer to a master's program. Currently, we're working on a new baccalaureate program in my area where the University of Cincinnati is like, well, that doesn't fit any of our other categories, but it actually fits our master's program. So it actually opened another door instead of closing one. It introduced a new opportunity.
Yeah, and I think to add to what Kyle said, I think it's interesting because it seems like most schools, their first program to sort of, if they're a community college, to sort of get into the bachelor arena is nursing, because nursing is needed everywhere. And there's such a need that even though the local university may offer a nursing degree, they'll allow a community college to offer one just because the need is so great. And then once that door is open, it may be a little bit easier to get other degrees. I think that's one big issue. I think, another issue too is if students are starting out with this at the community college, most community college students do not like to travel. So they wouldn't, and plus they're probably, if they're a community college student, there's a good chance they've got a family and they're embedded in the community. So they probably wouldn't want to or cannot go to, spend 4 years or somewhere, out of town because there's too embedded into the community. And the cost, obviously, well, not obviously, people may not know that community colleges or state colleges can offer a 4-year degree at about probably 90% less than a university. And I think another benefit as well is the amount of hands-on that we're able to give in the bachelor level is because we are so used to providing a high level of hands-on in the associates, and that just carries right into the bachelor's for us. A lot of universities would focus more on theory when we're focusing on the applied technologies that will help someone get an entry-level job.
Yeah, in some of the things that Ernie is mentioning, we actually interviewed some of the schools for this, and once we have our full talk or whatever, we can describe this a little bit more. But we actually talked to schools that lived in rural communities offering baccalaureate programs because they would either be 2 or 3 hours out of a university to go get a 4-year degree. Where, take for instance, Washington State had community colleges close enough to communities, it was a whole lot easier to do that than to try to send students away to universities to get their 4-year degrees. So it did become a regional issue or a regional problem they were trying to solve.
Yeah, and I think another advantage too is most community colleges, probably all, are open access. So even though our 2-year degrees will take anybody, right? And that's the same with the bachelor degrees. Universities, they're much more, they have a much higher entry um, level, I guess, to get in. They might have a 3.5 GPA or something. Well, at a community or state college, I think ours is about 2.5, so it's a little bit easier to get in. It's more applied and less cost. So I think there's some of the big advantages.
So that sort of brings us, to a question. Could you talk about what you found in your research? What are the advantages of having community colleges offer these 4-year degrees, which I think a lot of them are obvious, but maybe you can, talk about what you found. And then have you found any disadvantages? Are there things that, people need to be aware of, or, going into something like this where you're going to apply for, offering a 4-year degree? Are there things they need to be aware of?
So I think, one of the things that community colleges and state colleges that offer 4-year degrees are really good at is being in tune with the regional community, right? Because that's our goal, right? As a community college, let's say here in Jacksonville, we focus a lot of attention on Jacksonville. The university that's here is a great university. There's a University of North Florida here in Jacksonville, but they're not really, most of their students come from across the country. So they're not looking specifically here at Jacksonville what the opportunities may be. They try to prepare students for any job across the country, right? At the same time, we are making very, very close relationships with the business community here in Jacksonville. As a community college, that's something that all of us do all the time. So not only do we have very close relationships with the business community, that allows us to place our students and find out what's important as far as the curriculum goes, but it makes it much easier, for students to get jobs and for us to understand what the local community needs and build curriculum around that.
And that kind of gets into the applied piece, right? So a lot of the baccalaureate programs that we looked at were all applied baccalaureate degrees, which that adds a lot more credit hours directly to the applied area compared to an Associates of Science or something like that. An Associates of Applied Science had a lot more focused area, up to like 20 some more credit hours towards that applied piece. And something that Ernie has brought up before is that community college seems to have a hands-on with the local industry, but also maybe with industry certifications and focusing around applied technical skills to the now. I think about our own program. We're looking at having an applied baccalaureate program in software development. It wasn't going to be computer science. It wasn't going to be like Boolean algebra and all that, but it was like how to do Angular and how to apply all of these new concepts into a deeper area than what we would just have with an associate's. So when somebody left, they could do agile, they could do all of the stuff that a business needs. Now, if I could switch real quick, because John also asked about what are the downfalls or what are the issues. Well, we talked to a couple schools that said that they had issues trying to place their students still, even though they had baccalaureate degrees. There was a couple of HR managers that said, oh, well, that's from a community college. And it was kind of like,
even though it was a baccalaureate degree.
Even though it was a baccalaureate degree.
Yeah, that's definitely an issue. But I think that's changing too, because, a lot of companies are looking, we pair our students, like Kyle said, we focus a lot on vendor certification. So those are easily recognizable by anybody. So even if the company doesn't recognize the community college as having, a bachelor program, I think the certifications help. And the amount of hands-on our students get, if you think about it, a student graduating a bachelor degree at a community college is really almost getting master level technical. I'm just talking technical content, because most universities, the students' first 2 years is basically an AA degree, right? So they spend the first 2 years doing AA. Well, from the first day in most of our colleges, community colleges, the first day they are doing technical work, whether it's A+, Security+. They are starting from day one. So we have 15 hours of gen ed in in our AS degree, which leaves 45 hours for a 60-hour program, 45 hours of technical content. So they get that 45 hours plus all the technical content in the bachelor's, right? So they're far exceeding the ability of a university to offer the same level of technical content, because the university is really starting in the third year with the technical content for the most part, because the first 2 years are gen ed or AA type courses, and that's an advantage. I know, Kyle, you were responding to the disadvantages, but honestly, other than the one you mentioned, I can't think of another disadvantage.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's great that a lot of your research has touched on a variety of topics that we at community colleges are, to some extent, involved in already. The interactions with the state ed department, interactions with our local four-year, interactions with our local industry. And we need to understand, in light of your research, which part do we need to work more on? Which part do we need to strengthen? Where are we going to encounter obstacles? Where are the lessons learned? Things like that.
So I want to thank Ernie and Kyle for spending some time with us this morning. The purpose of these videos is really to spur interest in this topic when we come together and meet at the conference. So if you're out there and you're watching this, we would really appreciate you contacting Ernie or Kyle. And if you have information you'd like to share, if you've got data, things about your transition from 2-year to 4-year and the impact that your schools have had, that's really what this conference is all about. And the idea is to put out some literature out there for schools that are going to go through this in the future and enable them to make an easier transition and have communities have a better understanding of what the impact of community colleges offering these 4-year degree programs. So thank you for joining us today.
And thanks, John. Thanks, James.